What if I told you that your story has the power to make our world a better place? Would you believe me? Would it make you want to share your story more? Well, my name is Matt Story, so I may be biased, but join me as I sit with leaders that are doing just that, sharing their stories of unique lived experiences that they've turned into superpowers that they now use to make a positive impact on our world. Welcome to another episode of What's Your Story podcast. Before we get into hearing from my guests today and learning more from their story, I wanted to share something that's come up in a few conversations I've been having recently around not only having a podcast, but just creating content. And, one of the things I really enjoy is being able to connect with someone that is interested in starting their podcast journey or looking to understand what goes into it and how they should be thinking about setting it up. But what I realize is it even takes a lot to get to that step, because I think a lot of us have great ideas for whether it be podcasts, it'd be, YouTube series, it'd be any other, TikTok videos, on and on and on. I think there's a lot of just great ideas out there. But there's sometimes going to be a barrier that stands between us and starting. And for me, what that barrier really started as, it was like there was this fear of, what if people judge me? And what if they don't like what I'm putting out there? Or what if no one watches it? Or what if no one, downloads the podcast? And I think that can prevent us a lot of times from hitting that publish button or hitting that post, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or what have you. And what I realized is, well, yes, that may protect us from ever seeing that fear come to manifestation and seeing, no one engage with content that we spent time and energy putting out there. But what it's really doing is it's preventing you from sharing your perspective. It's preventing you from sharing what has really been given to you as a gift with the world. And so I was reading this article, and it stated that each day over 1.1 billion pieces of content are published on social media. That's every day. So over 1 billion things are going to be posted today on social media. And while that's a fascinating number just to think about the scale and just how big these networks are, the associated fact that really blew my mind is nearly 60% of that content gets no engagement. That means no likes, no comments, no views. It just goes almost in silence. So that means 60% of what is going to go out into the world today via social media networks and other channels is not going to get any engagement, but that happens day after day after day. And so I share that because as we think about how we might be able to share our perspective, again, it doesn't have to be a podcast, it could be other formats or other channels, not letting the fear of no one engaging with it stop you. And what I've seen in my own podcast journey is you'd be surprised how many people are going to see, engage, and actually enjoy what you have to say. And there's nothing better for me than when someone that I didn't even know was watching the podcast, I didn't even know was listening to a podcast, comes in and they are able to quote something that one of the guests said, or they're able to play back how a conversation that was had on my podcast really was timely in helping them on their own journey. And that to me shows that the work that we put into these endeavors, whether it be creating content or coming up with new formats to express your views, is truly important. And so for me, just knowing that even if you put it out there and no one sees it, you're in the majority. There's 60% of that content that isn't going to get engagement, but there is that off chance that you're in the other percentage, you're in the minority that's going to actually impact. It's actually going to move someone further along on their journey. It's going to inspire them to chase a dream. It's going to let them see themselves in your perspective of what you're sharing. And I just think that, again, that's why I started the podcast, because I thought there's so much in our stories. There's so much richness in what we can share with each other. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're thinking about that idea, or you're sitting on draft of a LinkedIn post, or you're, considering, starting up something with a friend, just like make the leap, jump and see what happens, because you would be surprised the impact it'll not only have on you, but the impact it'll have on the community around you. And to me, that is truly the benefit we have of really helping others understand the things we've been through, helping others see the ways and the hacks and the things that we've uncovered. And all of us have some form of expertise that we can share. And when we learn from each other, that's when we're able to truly be at our full potential. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a reason to lean into that content. That gives you a little bit of reason to not worry about who's going to not see it, who's going to not publish it, and go ahead and post and make it happen. My guest on the pod this week is a founder, marketer, and genealogist who has spent the past 17 years as his family's historian researching his story. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that story. So please welcome Jourdan Brunson to the show.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Excited to be here, excited to talk.
Well, thank you for jumping on the mic. And, as this pod's about storytelling, and to be with someone that is so immersed in the stories of not only your family, but other families as well, I was really excited to speak with you. But before we get into all of that, I'd love if you could take us back and maybe share a story about what little Jourdan may have been like.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Chicago, west side of Chicago. And so I guess funny thing, I think children are some of the most like uninhibited protesters. I just remember being a kid and like asking so many questions or questioning so many things, just like why are things the way they are, and probably burdening my mother with a barrage of questions just to kind of get an understanding of the world. And I think that curiosity to understand more about the world that surrounds me, and like I said, why things are the way they are, has really colored the person that I am, and the paths that I've taken. So I'd say definitely someone who wasn't afraid to learn and question, and was really curious to understand and get my hands on things, through my eyes and through asking, not being afraid to ask. So that's really what life was like, aside from anything else that a child would enjoy.
I think you hit on the nail with kids having that uninhibited ability to kind of say, what's over there? Why is that this way? But did you have an idea of like what you wanted to be when you grew up, or any early thoughts on the journey you would take from a career standpoint?
Yeah, I think in a similar way, it was whatever I could see. I remember in kindergarten, they would have like after school, different professionals come in and just kind of display their talent or talk about their work. And the first that I remember anyway was an artist that came in and did a live painting for us. And I went home and I remember telling my mother, like, I want to be an artist. And it was just something new, something that I could see and understand. And then I think the next week there was a mime that came in and pantomime for us. And so that was new and exciting. And so that's what I wanted to be, that week. But I don't think that there was like a pressure that I felt anyway to have to be a certain thing. So I definitely was in an environment that encouraged me to explore and to continue like discovering what were the things that I liked and didn't. And so eventually that did help me land in a spot for a while anyway, in medicine. My mother has worked in the medical field for most of my life. And so through that, I got exposure to the oncology practice that she works for, and really wanted to find a way to help folks, but also use or put to use my interest and curiosity, specifically in the sciences. And so medicine was a route that I saw that taking shape for a good while, until I think I eventually found other passions and interests that allow me to do those same two things, to like, explore my interest in science, remain curious, and help others.
Well, during our prep call, you mentioned you attributed your mom with really being the one that helped develop not only your curiosity but your love for stories. And so, selfishly, as a parent, how did she go about that? Like, what were the things that she did that really allowed you to follow your curiosity and know that it was okay, but to also understand the power behind our stories and learning other stories?
I think one is, she may not have had the answers to everything. And I'm sure I was full of questions. One thing that she did was encourage me to go seek out those answers that she didn't know. So whether it was dating myself, but looking at Encarta on the computer, looking something up in a dictionary, finding other people to ask, I was being encouraged to seek out those answers that I didn't know, and not, rest at not knowing. Or stopping or ceasing to ask my questions. Another thing is, I think she made discovery interesting. And so, you mentioned that I shared that her stories were kind of captivating for me. And that was, I think the way that she went about any sort of information sharing kind of helped me help my interest. And so storytelling being one of her methods, or it would just be stories that she would make up on the fly in a lot of cases, or something to keep me busy, um, really helped me to dream and imagine, but also developed this passion and interest for um, understanding, finding, and creating stories as well. And so I think that's also really just layered the person that I am, the interest that I have, and ultimately the path that I've taken as a genealogist.
In previous interviews on this podcast, I always like to understand kind of those pivot moments. And when people are on one path, but they decide not to go down that path, they decide to pursue something else. And again, you started working at Lyft, and you were one of those folks that was helping the early startup grow. And you were really in the throes of kind of, where technology was going, where community was going, and all that. But you said that you felt something was missing. And so I'm just curious, like, what was that feeling? How did you address that initially? How did you know that you needed to actually make that pivot and move away from what was probably people thought was like you had made it and you'd gotten a great job with a great up and coming company?
One, I'll preface that Lyft kind of entering my life was unexpected. I studied finance, and for a while thought that that was the path that I wanted to take. After a few internships, I felt that while I could go into a finance role, be comfortable there, I just felt that the pace of things, just from a technology adoption, and just really the pace of decision making, was a bit too slow. And so it just so happened that as I was finishing my degree, I had come across an opportunity with Lyft, and um, through taking a few marketing classes, it's like, I'll give this a shot. It sounds interesting and exciting, and I haven't quite figured out which direction I wanted to go yet. And so came on with Lyft, like you said, in the Chicago area around 2014. Things were exciting. Like I said, there was no shortage of movement. The pace was absolutely not slow. So totally opposite of my experiences in finance. But I did feel that there was something missing. I guess the context there is in high school, I had developed this interest, or found this interest, in family history, which really did a good job of combining, the storytelling interest, the questioning and discovering information, and really combine those uh, skills into a path that I didn't expect to eventually be a career, but certainly a passion that I followed from the time that I was in high school. And really, what I would say was missing is that element of passion. I certainly was able to, ask questions, discover things in real time, win and fail really fast and in rapid succession in my roles at Lyft. But I did feel that there was some level of passion and personal interest that was missing, and I'm sure many people can relate to that. Just not working in the field that they might care the most about, or maybe even have the most experience in. And so I did want to find a way to combine some of the elements of fast-paced learning, still finding a way to help folks with that passion that had been underlying for the previous 5 6 years. And so that didn't immediately happen. I left Lyft after about 3 years, went to work for a number of other startups, and really polish and shape skills in these fast environments where I can learn quickly, still have like immediate value and impact, and help founders and their audiences. But I think that element of passion still wasn't quite there for me personally. And so around 2019, I began questioning myself in like how I was going to insert these personal passions that I have of family history into the work that I'm doing. And really things started to transition around that time.
It's interesting because there's two ways of thinking. And from what I've heard from, I'll call them talking heads, some people tell you to follow your passions, and if you don't follow your passions, you're not going to be fulfilled, et cetera, et cetera. But then you have other people that say no to what you described as find ways to add value, and that's how to build a journey and a career. And so how were you able to kind of blend those two where you were still adding value to not only what you were doing but other people, but also you were following that personal passion of what lit you up. And so how did you go about really bringing kind of both those ways of thinking together in a way that worked for you?
Around summer 2019, I had convinced two buddies of mine to go on a trip to New Orleans and Mississippi. So two places that were of interest to me, one for my family history, and as also as places that I had never been at that point. And so I was like, hey, let's take this trip. They happen to have family from those places as well. They knew that I do, genealogy work, not professionally, but I had done some research for both of their families. And we ended up taking this trip for a few days that for me was certainly transformational. They were places that I had wanted to travel to for the previous 10 years, just knowing my connections to the places. And having gone, I was able to put visuals and just like be able to touch and stand on the earth that I had seen on paper, that I'd heard through stories from my family members, and really make all of those things real, make them physical. And I left that trip being empowered to find that intersection of the work that I was doing already, and growth marketing, finding fit, finding audience, and growing out and messaging, along with this ability to discover story, discover self, help others do that. And initially, I thought, I don't necessarily want to be a professional genealogist. It's a different kind of work, a different kind of speed, but there's probably something that I can do. So later that year, I ended up taking a trip for Year of the Return with some family members and a friend to Ghana, Togo, Benin, and Senegal. And those were similar experiences, not quite the same in that I think my more immediate connection were to these places here in the US. But again, just caused me to think again about how can I find this connection to passion and work. And so then came the pandemic. So I end up on an app called Clubhouse, which for those who may not know, is a app format forum, if you will, where there is like audio only topics or spaces that you can enter to talk about any topic. And so there I found a community of folks who were building or who were helping others discover their family history. It was specifically a space for Black folks. And so I quickly grew this space. We were hosting lots of virtual events. And I come across someone who had lived and worked across the African continent, who herself is a founder and had founded other companies. And we began to talk about our experiences in travel, family history, and also the work that we do in tech and with technology, and began to question why don't certain things exist? Why am I unable to do this and find my family history XYZ? And that questioning kind of snowballed into one opportunities for our community that we were building. We grew the community to a few thousand folks in pretty short time. We started a DNA project for the community, which revealed many of us were cousins, and it just so happened that me and this individual found out that we were related and that our families are from a very small town in Southwest Arkansas. And we again asked the question, like, why didn't we know about these connections that we have to one another, or the places that we're connected to? And again, just kind of began to find an opportunity for us to blend together our experiences in tech with this interest and passion for family history. And so that person is my co-founder and cousin, Tamisha Rudd Ridge. And we ended up growing in that community, but realizing there was a much greater need, that we needed to really develop tech that didn't exist. Not your Ancestry 23andMe, not going to the courthouses and getting physical records, but a need for a tool that, one, is resonant to Black folks in our experience with family history, one thing that we talked about is, the importance of story, and that's really how we pass history through our lineages. Where oral tradition from generation to generation is how we keep it. It sometimes doesn't get written, and so there has to be a tool that accommodates to that and the unique experiences in history that we have. So really, it was a cathartic experience of just finding um, the right the right group, the right thought partner, having gone through the right experiences of traveling to places that inspired me, and really just remaining curious through all of it, and finding methods of improvement, as well as opportunity to combine that passion with talent.
It's kind of phenomenal to think about, one, you following your curiosity, but also two, it's not how your steps were laid out and numbered. And you were meant to be where you were at and the times you were there. You were meant to be on the platform of Clubhouse in that moment to be able to find your community and ultimately find your co-founder. Um, but I guess to break down what you guys are actually building, one of the things you shared with me, which actually it gives me chills now thinking about it. You said when an elder passes away, a library burns. And I felt that was just such a great visual analogy to how we should really be thinking about passing down to these stories. And so I'm curious whether it's how you guys are laying out your product roadmap, how you're building things, or just in general, what advice would you give those that still have their elders with them, and how they should be thinking about ensuring that those libraries don't burn?
My really deep dive into family history, like I said, started in high school, but started kind of in an unfortunate way. I was at a funeral for our family's historian, who I had only met once, didn't know that she was the family historian, but at her funeral learned so much about her, learns that she had all of the family photos, she had all of the stories, and I was hearing bits and pieces that the generations after her could remember, but um, having lost the opportunity, or not had the opportunity to talk to learn from this individual, really felt like I was missing out on, like you said, there was a library that I just didn't have access to. And so literally that night I started, researching my family history. But, the thing that we're creating in our company called kinkofa, which is a reference to the Adinkra proverb of the Akan people in present day Ghana and Ivory Coast, which is kind of broken up into, or combining the words kinfolk of African American English, and Sankofa. That's the proverb that I reference, where it's okay in this case to go back and get your family and the stories of your family to move forward. So we're kind of creating new meaning for the word Sankofa by putting it with kinfolk. And the way that we're doing that is enabling Black folks to have tools, one, that are for us and our experiences as a people, our histories, and the ways that we tell, discover, and keep our stories. And we're creating we have a workspace that allows you to do that. Our tool Rememory allows you to record stories. So similarly to how we're talking and recording now, you can talk to your relatives, you can record your own memories and stories, so that for the generations that come after you, they're not lost. And I just think about, if I had the opportunity to sit with the elders who left before I started my journey, there was so much more that I would know, or that I wouldn't have had to painstakingly find without their knowledge. And so, the advice that I would give is to not take that for granted. I'm even giving myself that advice in this moment. There's some people I need to call, but to seek out just a phone call, if nothing else, to connect with them, their wisdom and experience, and to develop that relationship. You never know what sort of information, knowledge, etc., can be shared. And so that's certainly the advice that I would give is, take no moment for granted. It doesn't have to be an elder either. It could be anyone.
No, I think it's a reminder we all need. And I frequently find myself not only giving it to myself, but also giving to people on the podcast because, we don't, I think I saw this week that time is the one resource that we don't know what the full capacity of it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should be very careful with how we spend it. And so it's a great reminder. But I'm curious, as you've now entered founder life, what have you learned about yourself by making this shift and actually combining that passion with your skill set to be able to make such a huge impact in people's lives?
Yeah, so much, too much. Yeah, I think there's every day there's literally a learning in being a founder, and I think that that's whether you're solo or not. I've had the fortune of having an amazing co-founder, and we learn from each other about ourselves. And the thing that I've learned in my journey as a founder is it's okay one to not know everything. It's great to not know everything. That gives you the opportunity to one learn something new, which I've certainly in my younger years not been afraid to do. But I think in certain professional environments, you'd want to uh, put on that you know so much or that you have expertise. But I think it's absolutely okay to find and seek out that support. In our journey, we've had access to other founders who have had amazing resources. We've been able to share with them things that we know and learn. But that's really the objective. We're building a tech company, and the goal isn't to do everything and know everything yourself. It's to bring other folks who know more about their domain than you do, and that you know just enough to uh, keep moving forward and keep toward the vision, but letting other folks advise and execute in their expertise. So I think that's probably the biggest thing for me. It's just finding other experts, learning from them, and collaborating with them.
You've shared how much of a curious person you are and how well you research. I'm curious, what are you researching right now? What are you looking into? What's piquing your curiosity?
A few things. So we're wrapping up the first part of a project that has spanned about 2 years. And just to kind of clarify, our company is a tech platform and workspace that anyone can use, but we also do partner with communities. And so we've actually partnered with a community in Dallas called 10th Street. It's one of the last and the most intact freedmen's town in the US. And these were communities established after emancipation by newly freed folks who, wanted to make something better for themselves and for their, the future generations. So this community has quite an amazing history, but it's very little known, even to people who have lived in Dallas their whole life. And so we, through the support of the Library of Congress and partnering with Southern Methodist University and some other partners, we've been able to document this community's history from its founding, find more about its founders and their descendants to present day, share with these descendants of the community over time the history that they're a part of, and document it. So it's going to be part of the Library of Congress, but also part of kinkofa's own collection that the public can have access to through digital museum and other activations in person. So shout out to our research team, Dolores Rogers, Katie Cross on that. Also doing some personal research and planning a family reunion for 2025. It'll be the first Brunson reunion in 25 years, actually. So
Wow.
doing some work
Wow.
on that. But what's next for Kinkofa? We are getting ready for some in-person events called Preserve the Culture that will kick off this fall in October, but really pick up in February for Black History Month, where folks can come into activations in different cities like Chicago, Houston, Dallas, and some other places to get their photos and records and stories digitized so that they're not at risk of being lost. They have another place to keep, discover, and share those stories, as well as take place in other activities that are just for the culture. Things like maybe jump rope, hand games, cooking, and other things that are just really vibrant parts of Black culture. So planning for that, fundraising, all that fun stuff, and that's really what's next.
Looking back over your story, I'm curious, have you had a mama we made it moment, or what has been your greatest achievement so far on your journey?
3 years ago, I would say it was finding, or 3.5 years ago, was finding that moment of this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do, and just having that feeling of fulfillment in finding and being able to live in and work in my passion. And I think each year since, it's being able to continue doing it, just being a founder, and having seen and knowing other founders who may no longer be, working on the thing that they were doing. I'm just fortunate in that I get to continue doing that. And so that for me is a personal accomplishment, achievement that, could change, but it's certainly fulfilling every moment that I get to do it. So I don't take that for granted at all. My co-founder, I think, shares that sentiment fully. And yeah, I'm fortunate to be able to do that.
It's interesting. There's a sense of gratitude throughout your story, and I'm just curious. How have you developed that, or how do you keep that going, even as you kind of twist and turn and up and down? Like, how do you keep that front and center?
Reflection is the biggest part of that, because there are absolutely moments that don't feel so gracious. There's ups and downs in the journey, but I think reflection and being able to see that the highest highs are much greater and more impactful than those low moments, or those difficult moments. And so I will be transparent in saying that it's not all perfect and rainbows, but I absolutely treasure each moment of it, even those tough moments, because they absolutely do strengthen and fortify my experience and my ability to continue. I know, whether it's something that didn't go well, I can pivot and make sure that the next time, goes a lot better. And I think just having that like learning experience, and I think having a co-founder and cousin and just general support system that continues to also push and lift me, and through all of it, has kept me humble and excited and motivated to continue.
It's so my wife's a founder, and I think there's something in taking an idea and actually activating, executing, bringing it to life, evolving it, switching it around, turning it upside down, having to, come up with creative problems, as I'm sure you have and will continue to do. I feel like being able to have that type of journey with your own thinking or your own, the tools you're building, it helps you in being able to see that perspective and to have that, like for me, I look at the podcast and like where it's gone from that first recording and into, now, over 170, like the evolution you see of a thing that, sometimes we get so caught up in the mundane day in, day out that you're not able to take a step back and really appreciate the evolution and appreciate the ups and downs. Because you're right that the reason the highs are highs is because of the lows, and if you didn't have the lows, the highs wouldn't be as high.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's something, really encourage everybody, even if you're not founding a company, to have something that you're actually truly watching evolve and watching grow, to give you that perspective.
Absolutely, that's it.
On the other side, what's been your biggest mistake or challenge you've had to face?
There's been lots of mistakes, but I won't call them that. I think just kind of reflecting back to what I shared, they're opportunities to be better. So I would say challenge. Being a founder has also been probably the most challenging thing that I've certainly worked with founders. I've been a part of early and founding teams, and have worked in startups for most of my career. So I've seen the challenges that come with it. I think, one of, just to give some examples, and something that I've heard on, some other conversations that you've had with guests on your show, is just not even being able to communicate and share your vision, but just knowing or reaching the understanding that some people may not ever understand or appreciate, your vision. And I think one learning that I've had in that is you sometimes have to be careful about who you tell your dream to. And this is something that my founder and I have said to each other in different ways. Not everybody's going to be able to continue on a full journey with you. Not everybody's going to, buy into what you're selling. And that's something that I found challenging early on, even to or with an audience that I expected to truly appreciate what we were doing. But I understood that, they may have to see the fullest version of this to understand it. They may not be able to buy in without being able to see and use it. And so that was a challenging moment, but I had to learn and move on and find both other ways of communicating my visions and other audiences who could appreciate. So that's probably been one part of the challenging journey of being a founder.
Yeah, I think that that's spot on of being careful who you share your vision or your dream or your ideas with, because there's people out there that call them trampolines,
Mm,
and there's other people that they're kind of pits,
mm,
and you want to find the people that are going to trampoline your thinking, that are going to build on your idea. They're going to say, you know what, that's a great idea and you should do this, or that's a great idea and I know someone who can help you, as opposed to this person that's going to tell you, oh, that's not going to work, or I wouldn't do that, or why are you and just being careful with that, because you absorb who you spend your time with. You absorb the people that you're sharing your gift with, and just having to be intentional. And I love the idea of, like, not everybody's meant to go through every part of your journey, and you have to be very careful in how you engage and interact. Um, kind of related. I'm curious, in whether it was when you finally made the decision to step out and to follow this passion, or even earlier in your journey, like, what fears have you had to overcome, or what fears have you had to face as you've moved through your journey? That again, looking back, you're like, I don't know why it was a fear, but I had to work through it.
Definitely the piece of like not having to do and know everything. So I know I mentioned it before, but just to, I think, elaborate on that. Family history, genealogy as a concept, as a thing, you would think is pretty collaborative. It involves other people and knowing, getting information from other people or other sources. But it is a very like isolating solo sport historically. I think that's changing in real time, but I think that it's as a passion of mine, it's required some level of focus, intention, and dependence on self. And I think in the journey of being a founder, whether it's kinkofa or really any company, you certainly have to have that same sort of belief in yourself, but you definitely have to be comfortable with collaboration, with a trust of others and what they will do and whether they'll perform up to your expectation. And I think there was definitely a fear, apprehension, and unfamiliarity that I had with that, like going into the journey of being a founder, hiring other vendors and contractors. Your company is your baby, so just being able to allow others to kind of come into your world and contribute their expertise and their input, and be able to take it for what it is and not personally, has been a new experience, because this is something that me and my co-founder are building or have been building for uh, on our own to start, and just to be able to bring in other folks has been rewarding, is where we eventually got to, but it certainly was a fear to begin with for me.
I'm a true believer that you can't inspire others if you aren't inspired yourself. So I'm curious for you, what are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching to be inspired by right now?
I have a funny, I think, example for that. Over the last few weeks, I've been rewatching season one of This Is Us. My
Hmm.
co-founder happened to have it on. I think we were watching something else, and it just auto played on Hulu.
Yeah.
And so I'm rewatching season one. It's her first time watching it, and just to be able to see one, the amazing storytelling that takes place in the show, but also the very unique stories that each character has, despite them all being intertwined, is inspiring. Just because I know that it certainly reflects real life, and as a founder, it just challenges me to think about the different experiences that we cater to. Our audience being Black folks, but we are a myriad of people, and that our experiences, our backgrounds, the things that we want to know, and how we know them are varied. And so that show has just kind of been inspiring to think about the stories that I know, the stories that others have and the things that people want to know about themselves. One of the main characters reconnects with their father, or connects with their father for the first time, and so I know that that's an experience that many folks have, and that's just been kind of rewarding to see happen in real time on the show.
One of the things I've heard a lot of stories, and they all are unique, but there has been a consistency that the folks that are actually fully tapping into their powers, tapping into their abilities, is they found a way to be in integrity with themselves. And so I think, a lot of times, as we've referenced before, you can, think you're supposed to know everything, or you think you're supposed to be in a certain room or doing a certain thing, which, when that's not in integrity with who you truly are, you hit a limit, you hit a wall, in terms of how you can actually operate. But I'm curious for you, how do you remain in integrity with yourself? Do you have any tips or habits or behaviors that you take to kind of keep that ability to know that you're being authentic, you're being true to who you are as a person?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's tips or habits, but there have been practices here and there. It's a different word. Um, right now, I think over the last few months, even one practice has just been the way in which I use or engage social media. I think social media, even the news. Like I check Google News every day just to see what the top stories are, and I think what you ingest, the information that you ingest, can determine how your day goes, like how the way that you feel after reading the thing, um, the things that you want to accomplish, or the person that you want to be, can all be influenced by these like incoming notifications and posts and whatnot. And so I definitely uh, caution around what information I ingest. I was talking to my cousin yesterday about the top news stories, and that's probably why I mentioned Google News, where like all of the news was just so um, negative. And so I was like, okay, I have to do something to change that, because I don't want to start my day, or I don't want to, constantly, talk about things that are negative. So that's certainly a practice that I've been very mindful of over the last few weeks, and over the last few months, really, just with social media, just being careful about the information and visuals and things that I start my day with or continue my day with. It should all be things that move me forward toward the things that I want to accomplish or do, not the opposite.
Last question. If someone's listening, they're buying what you're selling, they're like, this guy is onto something, what are your last words of advice for them to find their journey, to find their path, to find their passion?
I think the thing that has rewarded me most is not being afraid to find it. So not, settling on a path that could have been totally different for me. I'm fortunate in that, again, I had a community of people that exposed me to new and more things. And I think if you haven't had that, don't be afraid to go find it and seek it out yourself, and to continue doing that, to continue finding new things to try, new things that you like or don't like. That has been absolutely the way that I've found myself into family history, into uh, joining Clubhouse when that was a thing, finding my co-founder, and starting Kinkofa. I can attribute all of it to some trial and error, but exploration being the biggest thing, and not being afraid of that.
If you want to hear more stories like this one, just search for What's Your Story with Matt Story wherever you listen to podcasts. Click the follow so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. And please leave a rating and a comment so others can find the pod as well. And lastly, if you want to follow me and see what I'm up to, just go to LinkedIn and search for Matt Story.